In these song close-up sections of the course, I'm going to take time every week to take a especially close look at some songs, a small number of songs that are kind of representative, that help illustrate various points that we're talking about in the history of the group's music. I really hope you'll endeavor to make sure you go and listen to those tunes, listen to them again and again. It shouldn't be too tough to get the lyrics off the internet, and kind of put the lyrics up in one window and have the music playing in another window and kind of watch it as it goes by. You're also going to see form charts that are coming up behind me that will help you organize the music as you listen to it and as I talk about it. Well, we're going to talk about 3 songs. Tell Me, Good Times, Bad Times, and Congratulations, all Jagger Richards songs. And what we want to do at the very beginning of this is think about Keith and Mick as songwriters and what their influences are. Now next week, I'm going to double back on 1964 and talk about some of the songs that they wrote for other artists, so that when we talk about these songs in 1964, it's important for us to know that these aren't the only songs that they wrote and that were recorded in 64, but they're most of the songs that were recorded by the Rolling Stones in 1964. A lot of the other songs that they wrote were written in a much more commercial type vein. And that may surprise some people, that Mick and Keith wrote songs that were very brill building. When we say brill building in the history of popular music, we mean professional songwriters like Carole King and Jerry Goffin, or Neil Sedaka and Howie Greenfield. People like that who were writing in the early 60s out of what we call the brill building, although actually the real building they were working at was a couple of blocks down Broadway. But we call it brill building to sort of talk about professional songwriters writing hit songs specifically designed for a teen audience. There's an awful lot of brill building in Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Much more than the image Andrew Luke Oldham was creating for them as members of the Rolling Stones would ever seem to indicate. And we'll see that popping out even in the Rolling Stones too. That's one reason why they were a little bit reluctant to have the band do some of their songs, because they knew the songs they were doing were so commercially oriented. They were afraid of maybe endangering the blues vibe, the authenticity vibe of what the Rolling Stones were supposed to be about. So let's talk about the first one here I've got on my list, and that's Tell Me, which, as you'll recall, appears as a single in the US, goes to number 24 in June of 1964, and it's also on the debut album. I think this one is really influenced by brill-building American hit single songwriting, as I was just mentioning a minute ago. The lyrics, if you read through them and hear them go by on the song, are kind of love, lament lyrics, sort of teenage love, lament, romance kinds of lyrics, which were very much a part of the kinds of lyrics that you would hear in American pop songs from the first half of the 1960s. The form that this song employs is something called a contrasting verse-chorus form, which means that there's a verse where the lyrics change each time the verse comes around, and there's a chorus, kind of more the sing-along part of the song, where the lyrics are pretty much the same each time. And then when we say contrasting verse-chorus, what it means is that the music for the verse and the music for the chorus are contrasting from each other. They don't just use the same music with a different melody or different lyrics. Sometimes they do. That's called simple verse-chorus. But this is contrasting verse-chorus form. So we get a verse and a chorus, a verse and a chorus. Then we get a third verse and a chorus, but the third verse is got an instrumental solo. That's often what you do the third time, is you insert an instrumental solo to create contrast. They come back with the chorus, and then they do a fourth verse and chorus, and then they continue with the chorus to a fade out in the song. Again, a very traditional kind of arrangement of a pop song for the period. I would put your attention especially to what we might call the doo-wop style chorus. It uses a chord progression that musicians recognize as being the 1, 6, 4, 5. That would all be in Roman numerals, 1, 6, 4, 5. That's often, or sometimes it's 1, 6, 2, 5. That's the doo-wop progression you hear in so much doo-wop. It's not strictly speaking doo-wop. It sounds more like the groups that came out of the doo-wop tradition from the early 1960s. So we might think of tracks from The Drifters, say, or Benny King. So when I say all that about this tune, I do it in order to sort of tease out the influences. When Jagger and Richards started to write songs, what were they modeling their first songs on? And my bet here is that they were thinking very much about brill-building songwriters, and they might have even been thinking specifically about the Drifters. And remember that they did end up covering a Drifters tune in 1964, so it's not like they weren't aware of that music. I can guarantee you that they were. The second song we're going to talk about is Good Times, Bad Times. It appears on the B side to It's All Over Now, which you remember was released in June of 64 in the UK and August of 64 in the US, and it was also on the American album 12 by 5 from November of 1964. Now this one, unlike Tell Me, this one really shows the band's blues roots. Right? It really is their attempt to write a convincing blues number, almost a kind of country blues number, because listen to the use of the acoustic 12-string guitar on this. It's very reminiscent maybe of a song by somebody like Leadbelly, who would have been somebody whose music they would have known quite well. Whenever during this period you hear somebody playing blues on an acoustic 12-string guitar, you got to think the references to Leadbelly, because that was pretty much his trademark at that time. The tune uses a kind of 8-bar blues structure, which is a simple verse form. This is often the case in blues tunes. There is no chorus. There's just verse, 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 each verse using the same music, oftentimes with different lyrics. Sometimes lyrics will come back, sometimes there will be solos over the verse, but basically that same this 8-bar progression is used again and again and again. So we get an intro, then a verse, a second verse, an instrumental verse, a new verse, and then yet another verse that fades out. You get to hear Brian Jones blowing harmonica on this, and so with the kind of blues feel that you get here, with the acoustic 12-string sort of the Leadbelly and the blues harmonica, it's really tough not to hear this as something not too different maybe from the kind of feel they were going for when they were covering Little Red Rooster or something like that. Anyway, very much their blues roots. So in these two songs, Tell Me, they're pop roots, they're pop models, and in Good Times, Bad Times, they're blues roots. Well, that brings us to the third one that I want to talk about here, and that is the song called Congratulations. It appears as a B-side to the song Time Is On My Side from September of 64, released, as you remember, in the US only, because Little Red Rooster was released as the single in the UK. This one, if you're going to try to figure out exactly what stylistic reference is going on here, I think this sounds like it's influenced by Beatles mid-tempo songs. That is the kind of sort of medium-tempo ballad or medium-tempo song that John Lennon might sing with the Beatles. When they get into the chorus part of it, where you hear the two-part vocals, it sounds initially like this could be Everly Brothers. Remember, the Rolling Stones toured with the Everly Brothers. It could be Everly Brothers, but to me, we always say about John and Paul, them singing together, that there's a really strong Everly Brothers influence. So it may not be fair to the group to say this, but it sounds to me like it's Everly Brothers filtered through the Beatles, right? So you really get the group doing something that might appear on one of the first couple of Beatles records here. The lyrics are very sort of typical of the time, not only of the Beatles, but a lot of sort of pop rock. I mean, the Beatles were trying to be brill-building songwriters sometimes, a lot of times too. The teen romance lyrics are about a guy who steals other guys' girlfriends. So the congratulations is congratulating a guy for stealing another guy's girlfriend, but he's not going to get my girl because she cares about me. And that's kind of the way the teen lyrics go. It's a modified AABA form. Again, that AABA form refers to a verse, that's your first A section. A verse, that's your second A section. A contrasting section, that's your bridge or your B section. And then you return to the first section, a verse or some modified version of that first section. So you get A, B, A. In this case, it starts with an intro. You get a refrain, which is kind of a modification of the form. And then you get the verse, verse, bridge, verse. The last verse I put in the form chart A prime to show that the refrain is sort of folded in to that verse to complete the form. Once you've got an AABA form, you pretty much have the whole song there, and then usually it won't be long enough to end there, so you've got to bring material back. So what the Stones do is they bring an instrumental verse, and then they bring that verse employing the refrain from before, and then you get another verse to fade out. So they just sort of stick with A sections or verse sections to take the thing out. So seeing them using the AABA form, which is a typical Brill building kind of form, and the number of early Beatles songs that are in AABA form, gosh, the percentage of that must be, it's more than 80% on the first batch of 4 albums. It really looks like they're modeling this song on, you know, the Everly Brothers and the Brill building as filtered through the Beatles. Well, that concludes our lectures for this week. Next week, the story is about Satisfaction. It's about 1965 and how the Rolling Stones, having had a lot of success in 1964, come to the United States in 1964, had kind of a, well, moderately bad experience in the summer of '64. Come back in the fall, have a much better experience. In 1965, they're going to have a fantastic experience. That's why I call, with regard to the Rolling Stones, 1965 the year of satisfaction.